Hey, Cindy Gould here, and welcome back to Create Your Victorious Life. I am so excited for you to be here today, and I want to welcome you to Zingo TV and to the Spanglish World Networks, channels 250 and 251. Yes, they're Roku channels. Yes, you can download them on your respective apps, whether you're on iOS or on Verizon. I'm sorry, not Verizon, on Android devices. And while you're doing that, by all means, please leave us a stellar rating and a beautiful comment, because we love to hear those. And I am also excited to invite you to the HER network. And I'm super duper excited today to invite my beautiful friend who I just love and treasure, Carla Hooker, here today. I mean, I'm looking through her bio. I said, send me this short bio. And, it's hard to pick out stuff. So I'll just start with the fact that she's a DC girl. Let's just start there. She lives in Washington, D.C. She's from Washington, D.C. I think one of the things that I love most about her is that she's such a passionate advocate for children. And she has dedicated her life to teaching them through dance, just some of the most beautiful things that they can create and be present with in this world, through a lot of her own health challenges that have pretty much halted her in certain directions when she was younger in her life. She took that pain and turned it into purpose. And now children from all over the world get to benefit from it. And so do we as grownups. She's gotten tons of different awards and things, like the Outstanding Community Service Award, Youth Scholarship Empowerment Award. She walks in a room and she lights it up. And I love that. One of the things that I think is super cool too is we have this in very much in common. Last year joined Les Brown in co-authoring a book. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Like, Brother Les Brown. I mean, how cool is that? And we both love him. And he is also one of my mentors. And so I'm really thrilled. And without further ado, welcome.
Thank you, Cindy. I am happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. So we always jump right in and start with this first question. And so I know you might have had a little bit of time to think into it. And so maybe share with our audience the opportunity that you were given to not create a victorious life, and then how you took it and said, forget that, and you've created victory in your life all over the place. If you would, please.
Okay. Well, I can start with the most recent one. When I had COVID, I was waiting to get the vaccine, and it was St. Patrick's Day of 2021. And I ended up with COVID. And I thought, well, I had been a paramedic. I can just treat myself at home. I'll check in with my doctor. I'll see how I'm feeling. I'll be okay. I'll rest, because other people told me they'd been through it and they just rested. They felt lousy for a few days, plenty of fluids, and they got over it. But that didn't happen for me, Cindy. I ended up being transported by my father, the wonderful Wayne Hooker, to Duke University Hospital. And I got there, I think I arrived around 11:30 that morning and didn't get in the back part officially. I had been triaged, but I didn't get in the back in the emergency department until probably almost 11:30 that night. And the next thing I knew, the doctor was saying, I just need to listen to your breathing and determine what is the next course of drugs or whatever I need to do for you, whatever type of treatment. And I remember her taking the stethoscope and moving towards my chest. And then the next thing I knew, all these nurses and doctors were running towards me. And I'm like, what's going on? And then I blacked out. When I came to, I was being wheeled in to ICU. Everybody looked like ethereal astronauts, because everybody had on white and all I could see was their eyes. So that is what happened to me. But I am still here. And it's because of my faith. It's because I stood on the promises of God, and I knew that it wasn't my time to go yet. I still have more life in me.
Right. Well, and that is at this season in your life and early on in your season. And thank you for sharing that. And we'll go back to that in a sec. Early on in your life, you're rock and rolling in your life, and then you're diagnosed with something else, which is something you're extremely passionate about.
Yes. I was diagnosed with sickle cell disease as a baby, but many people, even some family members, did not know that I had the disease or disorder until later on when it started affecting me in elementary school. I couldn't participate in sports because I would get too tired, or it would throw me into what's called a sickle cell crisis or a pain crisis. And what it feels like, without making everybody feel down, or I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. That's not my purpose. My purpose is to help people understand the disease and be more passionate towards others with the disease, like my brother and I. The disease feels like shards of glass at its worst, in going through the blood vessels and the bones and muscles and joints and organs, cutting you from the inside out. And it's very painful. It's very uncomfortable. There are 2 cures now, but it's not universal for everyone. So people are like, oh, well, you can, when they heard about it on the news, a lot of family members and friends, just out of love, everybody was texting me, blowing up my phone, calling me, there's a cure, you can go get a bone marrow transplant. You can go get this cure. You'll be fine. But I don't qualify for it, because with sickle cell, even though I'm 55 years young, my body on the inside is about 20 years older, according to the doctors. So my organs are not that of a 55-year-old, even though I eat healthy, I take good care of myself. I drink a lot of water because that helps with the disease. But they won't do or even attempt to do any of these cures on someone my age. My late brother Wayne, and I tried from the time we were about 35, 40, and they told us then we were too old. We were even willing to go to Chicago for the treatments and the cures, but we didn't qualify. So it's okay. No, it's okay, because every victory for those who do qualify is a victory to me too, and for others with sickle cell disease. We call ourselves warriors.
You know what? I appreciate that, and I appreciate the way that you frame that for yourself too. I do, and I know that you mean it, and
Yes,
I appreciate that. I know you do, and I appreciate that too. You're not just doing the fake humble thing. Like you genuinely mean it, and I appreciate that. So for those of our audience, because I would venture to say that the majority of our audience would not really understand what sickle cell is. I know that what the result of it, having this dis-ease, and I love that word because it's so descriptive. What's not at ease body. And so when you have that dis-ease or disorder, whichever, and you said it's like having shards of glass at their very worst in all these areas in your bones and all over, which perspective, my back's a little, as opposed to a constant daily situation that you experience. What actually is sickle cell? Like, what causes it? All of the things, because I know you're an educator of that as well.
Right. What causes it, without attempting to be a doctor, because I am not. I was a paramedic, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. So let me do that disclaimer. However, I've lived with it all of my life. Sickle cell disease affects the blood and the hemoglobin, and the lack of hemoglobin in the blood causes the cells. I always use food, Cindy. So because that makes me happy, it makes other people happy. And I don't use the healthy food when I describe it, but it's okay. Everybody has seen a donut, so I'll put my fingers right there. So a donut is nice and round and spongy, and it's good. And you can move it around. It's bouncy. It's supple. That's what normal red blood cells look like. But with sickle cells, because of the lack of oxygen, they're shaped like a sickle or a banana or a crescent moon or a croissant. And when they are flowing through the blood vessels and veins and arteries, they get stuck because they're not flowing through like that donut. the donut red regular normal blood cells, so they get stuck and they cause clots, blood clots, and that's what causes the pain. And it can occur in any part of the body.
Okay. Okay. So I get it. And thank you for sharing that, because
You're
I think
welcome.
education is really important, even for people that, have no idea, but then they might see a fundraiser for it, or they might hear of a family member, somebody that has it. It gives you a broader lens of compassion and a deeper capacity potentially to love that person through that experience. And, what a double whammy for you that, okay, great. Now they have this potential, cure thing, and then you don't qualify. You're like,
Right.
what the heck, God, right? And I know. So you love dance and all those things. And when you describe shards of glass and you're a teenager, how do you do that? Like, because I know you turned everything into this super, super, super cool thing the business that you have, which I really want you to share with people what you've done with it. But, your experience as a child, how did you navigate through that?
A lot of times as a child in elementary school, I was tired most of the day. So around this
Mm,
time of the day, anytime after lunch, I was exhausted. And I spent most of my time in the bathroom. It's a wonder I finished elementary school, because I spent mostly all day in the bathroom, because we're asked to drink water all the time. Every hour we're supposed
oh,
to drink water. I have a glass of water sitting here with me now, because it helps keep us hydrated, and it helps the blood cells flow, and keeps them from clotting and sticking
okay.
together. So it was difficult, but I got through. And I had to
Yeah.
learn. That's when I first learned how to advocate for myself, because they didn't have individual education plans then. And there was the 504 plan. Nobody really knew what that was back then in the 70s when I was in elementary school. So as I got older and in middle school, things got a little more difficult, because kids were just like, why, how come you can never take gym? Why do you dress out and you're sitting over there with your uniform on? Why,
Right.
why does your stomach look big like you're pregnant? And they would say all kinds of things. And I had to learn that it wasn't my fault. My stomach would swell, and it even
Sure.
does now sometimes, because of my spleen.
Oh,
It's called sequestration syndrome. That's a tongue twister for me. But it's when it's a lot of sickling going on in the spleen, and it causes swelling, abdominal swelling, that we
wow.
can't control. It's just part of the disorder. And
Right.
it's from infarcts, which are clots in the body. Again, clots is just a medical term. So that
Yeah.
I learned that I still could do things, but I had to know my limits, and I had to know when to rest,
Right.
just like I do now. But even though I still push myself beyond that limit, don't tell my doctors, but
Like
sometimes
we
you
don't
just got
know.
to do right. Sometimes
Yeah,
you just
like
got
I
to
don't
do what you
know. Well, what's really interesting is listening to you chat with what you're sharing right now. You were forced in a position as a youngster, like as a child, to either speak up and advocate for yourself or not. And you chose to speak up and advocate, which, knowing you, and I see you with your voice, and you have such a powerful presence in a loving way, I mean, not just this, in your face, wah, but a really gracious and beautiful presence. A lot of people didn't. I mean, I try to look for the treasures, right? I'm not try. I do look for the treasures in all of our adversities, because we know that God says he'll use all of it for our good when we allow him to, right?
That's
And
right.
so one of the best consequences of that for you is is the fact that you did learn how to advocate for yourself. You did learn how to speak up. You recognize those needs in other people that may not be being met when your tummy is bigger, when you're all dressed up and don't get to participate.
Right.
Right? How many times are we dressed up in our life and we don't get to participate, or we don't speak up to participate, right? And you
Right.
still showed up, stepped up, and stepped in. That's huge. And so you fast forward from there, all those things, and I'm sure there were so many teary moments, et cetera, you know, and as you triumphed through that, then you create this amazing dance. Tell us about that. I
Okay.
mean, with the art link letter, which I
I
love
went,
that. I mean, it's been forever since I even heard that. I hadn't heard his name in a zillion years until you mentioned it the first time we connected.
right. I went to Art Link Letter Dance Studio in Temple Hills, Maryland. It's no longer there. It's now Spirit of Faith Church.
Oh,
They
wow.
have a whole plaza. Yeah. It's amazing how God works. He works in
Yeah.
mysterious ways. And
Wow.
then from there, I went on and I got sick again. It's always a story about my health, but God always turns it around for my good and so that I can help others. I was
Right.
bedridden for a year.
Wow.
And then after I had a pilonidal cyst, which is on the tailbone. I had a cyst about the size of a grapefruit and an abscess on top of it about the size of a huge navel orange. So
Oh,
I had to go in and literally, and without sounding gross, get my behind packed every
right.
day at the doctor's office. And then I was bedridden for a year. I was walking like I was 1,000 years old. And my late brother Wayne, before he went into the Navy, was my caregiver 24/7 because my
Oh,
parents had to work. So after that, I was like, I'm not going back to East Carolina. I'm an ECU dropout, believe it or not, but in a good way. And I said, I want to do something different. Now, with my mom being an educator, that didn't resonate with her too well. And my
uh-huh.
father was a police officer, and he wasn't feeling that either. They were spending, which sounded like a lot of money then, $4,000 a semester for me to go to school out of state in North Carolina from DC.
Wow.
So they weren't really for it, but some kind of way, I've always been able to pitch and talk people into things. And that's when I started this dance troupe at my mom's school. And then I was offered a job. And from there, the mayor came out and the commissioners from the arts and humanities, and they loved them. They loved the kids. I didn't do just a regular, I was doing it, I was coaching cheerleading. And I turned the cheerleaders into this group called Bruce Blair and Company. And then from there, we transformed and transitioned into Carla's Kids Musical Ministries.
So you mean to tell me that you have this issue on your booty, you can barely walk, you're bedridden, and you
Right?
created a dance troupe?
Yes.
So, I mean, just imagine audience who's watching now or in the future. I can't get out of bed. I think I'll dance and create a bunch of people to dance with me. You know, I mean, it's like,
That's what happened. That's what
I
happened,
love,
Cindy.
oh my
Yes.
word. And on top of it, now my hallucination is I know for me, I already have ample booty. So if I had additional parts to it, right? And you're
Right.
young, what were you? How old were you at the time?
I
Like,
was, I believe, 20.
yeah, I was going to say like 20, right? And so you're already self-conscious and you're wanting to show up and you're wanting, you know, all the things 20-year-old beautiful 20-year-old girls want, and then you're in this situation. So okay, so you start this thing because all these years later, which would be 35 years later,
Mhm.
you're still rocking and rolling it.
Yes, I love it. Arthur Mitchell became my mentor
Okay.
about 6 months after I started. I kept saying, I'm going to meet him. I'm going to meet him one day. I'm going to meet him. And then my mom, she had a habit of reading the Washington Post out loud. And she said, you know, he's coming and he's looking for
Wow.
kids. And I was like, good. I'm going to let all of mine audition. And she said, no, they've got to be at least 10. I said, well, sorry, but all of them are going to be 10 for the audition because this is a chance of a lifetime. I said, if we make it, I'll tell him later. So that's what I did. And he said, I knew those, he said, I knew those 4 that I picked were not 10 years old. He said, now, Carla, how old are they? And 2 were 8 and the other 2 were 9. The twin brothers were 9. And they
Now
were
are
the
you
best.
wow. Wow. So fast forward now because you've got had so many super cool things go on in your life. What are some of your biggest takeaways from, let's just use that slice of your life pie for a second.
Okay.
You start this dance troupe, you do all these things. What are some of the biggest takeaways of pushing through? And I'm saying it like that on purpose because many of you who are watching are maybe struggling to push through no matter what level. You may not have, a physical ailment that's preventing you or stopping you or slowing you down or whatever, but you may be paralyzed by your own fear, right? Or by other things that get in your way. You just don't dare to show up for yourself. What would you say were some of your biggest takeaways on this and now reflecting back?
Reflecting back, as you say that, Cindy, my biggest takeaway was I almost didn't go the night that I was supposed to meet Arthur Mitchell in person at the Kennedy Center because it was my uncle's funeral. My uncle Frank had passed. It was a military funeral. Things got started late. By the time we finished the repast, I was already probably 20 minutes late to the symposium for dance teachers that Arthur Mitchell was hosting at the Kennedy Center. And I was like, I'm not going to go. I'm just, whatever, forget it. And my brother, my late brother again, Wayne, he's shining down on me today. He said, look, you need to go, late or not. I'll go pick up your dress from the dry cleaners, get dressed here at Aunt Lena's house, and you need to go. And I did. And I was the last person to show up, Cindy. And when I showed up, my friend Fabian Barnes, he passed away. He was signaling to me to come here because there were no seats. Everybody had been there. I was the only one that was late. And you never showed up for anything late for Arthur Mitchell. So I'm tiptoeing in and I sit down and then Fabian pushes me back in the chair and they start passing down. She's here. She's here. The guest is here. Tell Mr. Mitchell the special guest is here. He wanted to know when she arrived. And I was like, oh, good. Is it Debbie Allen? Who am I going to get to meet? It was me. It was me. So had I not shown up, I wouldn't have gotten that scholarship from him. I wouldn't have gotten an open invitation to be with him and hang out with him whenever he was in town, whether he was at the Watergate, whether he was hosting a fundraising luncheon at the Kennedy Center, Rooftop Terrace, or just whatever. I did a live taping with him. Even when my daughter was a baby, I could pick up the phone and just call him like I was calling one of my buddies. But if I had not shown up, Cindy, that's my takeaway. We wouldn't even be talking right now because none of that would have ever happened.
That's right. So those of you that are watching right now, I'm just throwing this out there so that I'm sure your mind's already going. Where have you not shown up? Where can you still show up? And what do you need to do to show up right now in your life? Whatever that is. Who's your Arthur Mitchell? Everybody's got one. Everybody's got a scenario, right? Where you're just supposed to show up and be you. So you show up there and you do that. I mean, and you're 20, right? At the time?
Right, 20 years old.
And you were the special guest. I was a special guest. At the Kennedy Center. Are you kidding me right now? Right?
With all these teachers from all over the DC area. And I was a special guest. I had no idea.
Wow. Now, so we're going to pivot a minute because one of the things that I absolutely treasure about you, and you don't know this, I love the way that you love, honor, and reverence your parents.
Thank you.
And it is, I mean, I have like total God bumps from that. So I knew that I was supposed to go in this direction. Okay. It's the only commandment with a promise, right? And I know because we have combos, how's your day? Do you have any time? Nope, I'm doing this appointment, this appointment, this appointment for dad, this one for mom, and I have so much just love for that.
Thank you.
Share with our audience, because yay that you have your parents, right? And right. As older children, we sometimes have to make decisions that include the things with our parents and on their behalf. What would you say are some of your greatest takeaways from that?
Okay. I enjoy doing it. I'm a caregiver, I think, by nature, and that's why I enjoyed being a paramedic for the time that I was, and studying and being involved with EMS to save lives and to
Okay.
help people. Now, and once I got those certifications, my parents and my daughter also, they think I'm on call 24/7 for them. And that's okay. It's a good thing. They're like, oh, my daughter knows. Let me call her. Oh, let me see what Carla says. And then whatever I say, they don't listen until I take them to our doctor. We all have the same doctor. Dr. O'Donnell is
That's funny.
wonderful. He'll say, what did Carla say? And they'll say, well, she said XYZ, ABC, whatever. And he'll say, and that's what I'm saying. So why didn't you just listen to her? They don't. I call them my toddlers and teenagers, because sometimes my parents are like senior toddlers and sometimes they're like senior teenagers. They don't listen. They don't listen. So I can only imagine what they went through with me as a toddler, because I was always all over the place doing stuff and getting into stuff. And then as a teenager, I really didn't get into too much, but I was sneaky doing something sometimes.
You
I'm
know
getting
what?
it back.
Do you find, I know for myself, even, I don't live in the same state as my mother. My father moved back home to heaven in November 2021. And before that, I had the privilege of talking with my dad every day, maybe once or twice a day for 30 years. And he would make the rounds and give us all calls. And if we didn't hear from him, we'd call him, and it was the most amazing treasure for me. And I know one of the things that I felt even the last, few times that I got to spend with my father, and I feel this way when I'm with my mom, it doesn't matter like what they're going to say or whatever. They've lived this life so fully. And I think I default to their wisdom still, and default, on purpose, even though we might be in situations. I'm not that way with my mom. She's like zipping around in her car and doing all the same things, and in her 80s, just zippity doo dah mom. But still, like, I know it's hard for some people when their parents get to a certain place and they're having to step in like you do.
Right.
And you see, like you said, senior teenagers, et cetera, et cetera. But I would just want to encourage everybody, don't forget the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that they have. And when you tap into that, you're helping them to really feel like they still have purpose,
You're right.
right?
Absolutely.
I know
Absolutely.
for
I've
me.
learned more than I've learned probably in my 55 years being with them. Like my dad just told me last year that my grandparents, his parents, my
Mhm,
granddaddy Carl and my grandma Marie,
mhm.
they played in the Negro Leagues. I'm like,
What?
I didn't know that. And he was like, oh, you didn't know that? I'm like, no, because you never told me.
Oh
He
my
said, oh
word.
yeah, they played in the Negro Leagues and your grandmother was a left-handed pitcher. Didn't
Wow.
know that.
Wow. How cool
Yeah,
to know that. I
right.
know my father shared so many stories with me about when he was in Korea in the war. And, when, because he was of the age, he was almost 90 when he died. So he was, we're Hawaiian, and he was there when on December 7th, 1941, when it was bombed, and told
Wow.
me about, yeah. And the things that he could share with me. And, one of the things, so when my father, was really cool with my siblings, because when he did that, we just kind of met at his place, and when we were cleaning it out and stuff, and who wants what, here's his scriptures, and here's his cool little shoe shine kit, because when he was in the military, he would shine those shoes. So on Saturday night, I have five brothers, and a sister, but all the boys would line up with their shoes, and one after the other would get them all spiffy for church, and then lay out. And I just loved all of that. But one of the things that was such an eye opener for me, and was that one of the treasures that I received, was my father's, one of his journals. And I was so grateful that he wrote in that, and my brother had, golly, when was it? 21 years ago, my brother had passed away. And, your parents put on their best face and all of that. I was reading his experience and what he was feeling during that time. Well, ironically, as I'm reading that, my son passed months. So for me to read his words of his devastation and of his faith was a real blessing for me, to
That's
be able to, yeah, right. And I
yeah.
thought, golly, and I had heard, was it Jesse Eitzler said, look, and this is so in your face, and I'm so grateful that this is not your experience, but how many more times do you really get to see your parents? Like for me, I don't live in the same state. So if I visit once or twice a year, that's nothing, right? I get maybe what, 4 or 5 days a year for maybe the next few years, whatever that is. Of course, I'm holding out for my mom to live till she's 120, but you know why. But I'm
Right.
like, however, right? That's not anything. That's not so yay that you get to do that. And yay, doesn't your daughter live close by as well?
Yes, she does. And she calls my parents her best friends. They're her
Oh,
besties since she was little.
that's
Her
so cool.
BFFs.
Oh,
Yes.
that's so cool. So now you've had this new venture last year, right? With Brother Les Brown. Talk to us about that.
Yes. I call him Mr. Les.
Mm.
He I was on the Real Success Network, and I kept saying, I just want to be able to be trained by Les Brown. I want to be able to be trained by Les Brown. And I had
Ah,
researched the investment for the trainings, and I was like, I don't know right now. I said, but God, you can make a way out of no way. And then one day he was on doing one of his Real Success talks live. And then he kind of looked up, like he was looking up from into the heavens and speaking to God directly. And he said, hold up, Brian, I'm thinking. And if he's watching this, I'm going to be in trouble for mocking him, but it's okay. And he said, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to do a training. The first 10, $1,000. I'm only taking 10. After it gets to 10, cut it off. That's it. And I was like, I gotta do this. I was number 8. And he
ooh,
said, I'm going to train them for 2 weeks. Brian, he said, 2 weeks, Les? He said, 2 weeks, me and them virtually on Zoom. So no one has to go anywhere. And I was like, thank you. He said,
wow.
right here on Zoom. And he did it March 7th. And it's still on my board over here in my office. I won't erase it. It's like, you get the first kiss from the boy and you don't want to,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to wash his cheek ever. Yeah, I have not, I just can't erase that board. And then he sent me the recording of it. He spent probably about 45 minutes with me, just he and I one-on-one. And at first I was like, boy, these other people are going to hate me. But, sometimes favor ain't fair. So
That's right. Ooh, that's good.
I loved it. I loved it. And I listened to it over and over again and what he told me. And I kept waiting for him to make all these corrections, Cindy. And then he said, Carla, you know how he'll lean in and look at you.
Oh, yeah.
You got it. And I was like, what? I'm waiting for you to, I didn't say this, but this is what I'm thinking in my head. I'm waiting for you to fix it and, craft my story and make it right. And he was like, just tell more stories. He said, tell me one now. And then I said, well, we have a lot in common. You were locked in the closet by your teacher. My teacher put me behind her desk. And when I said that, you would have thought I tickled him. Like I reached in the Zoom and just started tickling his feet or something, because he laughed for I don't know how long. He said, what did you say? And then I told him, and he found it hilarious. He said, tell that story more often. So I put it in my book. I put it in my childhood memoir that's going to come out later on this year called I Ain't Never Been Ordinary. And he said, Carla, tell those stories. And he said, tell me one more before we go, before I have to work with the other people. And I said, okay. And I told him about my mom coming in my room with the switch, because I had been teasing, me and my best friend Dana had been teasing this young lady who was supposed to be our friend at dance class. At dance class, Cindy. I'm teasing, and I knew I shouldn't have done it, but he said, what did you call her? And I said, I called her a chicken face because of her hairdo. I didn't like it, and I thought she looked like a chicken with the comb, like a rooster comb coming down the middle of her head. So when I said that, again, Mr. Les was cracking up. And he said, but what about your mom with the switch? I said, oh, I looked up really calmly And my mom was swinging the switch, and she was like, if you did it, I want you to know Dana already got a whooping, and you're going to get one too. And I looked at her. I put my Barbies down. She said, now, did you or did you not do it, Carla? I said, I did not. That was Dana. And he said, oh my God, you threw your friend under the bus. I said, hey, it was no need of both of us getting a whooping. She already got one, so she took one for the team. I was smart. Yeah. And he just fell out laughing.
I
So
love that. That's hilarious.
I tell more stories like that, and it's in my book of childhood memoirs. Thanks to Mr. Les giving me that idea.
Yeah, that's so funny. She took one for the team.
He did. I was not getting a spanking. I told my mom later, I said, and we still laugh about it to this day, and my mom's 80. I had seen Roots, and once they let me see Roots, I had this thing in my head, like, nobody's going to spank me because I saw Roots, and I'm not a slave, and I'm not going to be spanked. Now, I didn't say that to her then, because I probably would have gotten a spanking or punished. But I was an activist back then, especially after seeing that. Yeah.
That's so great. So fast forward, because now you are in, is it the Change book that you're in?
Yes.
Okay, talk about it. Let me see the cover.
Who's on the cover?
So pretty. So pretty.
Thank
Love
you.
it, love it, love it.
These two guys right here, Jim Lutz and Jim Britt, they're friends with Mr. Les, and they found me on Facebook. See, people don't believe me, but they found me on Facebook through Karen Hager Butler.
Okay.
Helps find people for the change with Jim and Jim. We call them Jim and Jim. And I had never heard of her, and she didn't know me from Adam. She told them she liked what I posted on Facebook. So they dissected my Facebook. They told me for about 3 weeks. My friends, what I posted,
Wow.
my family, who I was around, and then they approached me. Yep. So
And then
it's still a dream.
Well, tell us what it's about, like the book itself, how all of it.
The Change is the #1 personal development series right now in the world. We have 450 authors in over 30 countries. And I'm in volume 20, and it's Insights into Self-Empowerment. And there are 20 authors in here, including Jim and Jim and Mr. Les. And everybody tells their own personal story. My story is on page 166. I don't want to tell my story because then nobody will read it if everybody knows the story. So go get a copy of The Change.
Now, where do we get it?
I have it on Venmo. I'm working on another link, but you can purchase it on my Venmo, Carla Hooker.
Okay. And for those of us who don't have Venmo.
You don't have Venmo, inbox me. Send me your email address. I can send you a PDF copy.
Oh, how fun. Yeah. Pretty excited. That's pretty neat. I mean, who would have, and that's somebody that you just treasure. And so he's on the book cover with you, which is so.
He wrote the foreword. How cool is that, Cindy? He wrote the foreword for the book.
Yeah. How cool is that? You know, my experience with Les, and I already shared this with you, but he's part of the faculty of the Neuroencoding Institute, which is what I'm a part of and that I love and treasure. And I'm, the chair for the coaching committee, et cetera. So in Atlanta, this last April, just a month ago, we had an event there. And I didn't know till I got there that I was actually Les's handler for the day. And the day that he spoke, I know, right? The day that he spoke. And so I get there and I meet him in the back, outside where the cars come, and they introduced me to him. And the first thing he did was, and he did this the first time that we met online as well, in a Zoom event, not having to do with this particular thing. It had to do with the Institute, but not this event. And he sang that, Cindy, oh, Cindy, Cindy, don't you let me down. That. And I was just like taken aback for a second because my father used to sing that to me.
Wow.
Yeah. And I told him that instantly. And we both kind of had a quick little emotional moment, like, wow, this is cool. And then, of course, he does the Les thing. He's like, Okay, Cindy, you got a pad of, notebook and paper. You're going to want to jot stuff down. I'll be dropping gold today. And I was just like,
Yep. He always says that. He goes, Carla, now write this down.
yes,
And you
yes,
can't write fast enough because he
yes,
just keeps doing it. He keeps dropping
yes,
nuggets.
yes. And you know what was interesting is he was sharing something with my friend Corey and telling him about some very specific things. In fact, in regards to PTSD, and I'm looking to see if I have my notebook here because it was really cool. But what he was saying was, he said, "Hey, Cindy, write this down for Corey."
That's him. Yep.
And then I was like taking a quick picture of it so that I could, send it to Corey after. But how cool, right? And
Yes.
when you told me about your book, I thought, isn't it wild the way that God does what he does and aligns us at the right time with the right people in the right place, so
Yes.
that, because we're his strategy, right? We're
Mhm.
his strategy to end suffering in this world. We're his strategy to help as many of our loved ones make it home safely. We're his strategy to bring light and love and joy into the world, right? And
Right.
and isn't it interesting, because I met you on ENTV today?
Right.
The fact that we have, of all things in common, Les Brown.
Mr. Les.
Mr.
Yes.
Les, Brother Les Brown.
Yeah.
So I know, which is funny. So this is what he said about PTSD. So I'm going to quote him.
Okay.
So PTSD, I love what he changed that to be, because it's such a rampant thing. And the
Mm.
friend that we were talking about has been served in our military and other things, and all of that. And when you've had when you've experienced anything traumatic in your life, then you are susceptible also to that. So PTSD: purpose, talent, standout, and discipline.
I'm going to
How's
write that
that,
down.
ma'am? How's that for reframing?
Yes. Purpose, talent, stand up.
Talent, stand out, and discipline.
Okay. I like it. I love it.
Mhm. We'll be about that too. Is a lot of times, and so it's interesting. You never know where we're going to go on these conversations, right? This is
Right.
perfect for what you've experienced in your life. Because a lot of times you're going to hear people that are so anchored in their story and in their pain, that they are so present in their pain that they negate being present in their life. And
That's true.
so, right? And so
Right.
when somebody's anchored in that and in those spaces and in those places, you could have done that in your story. Like when I hear certain stories, let's just even use, if it was somebody that has PTSD, there's a secondary gain to staying stuck there, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to moving forward. I did a post today about really, you can't move into the next chapter of your life when you're still reading the chapter before,
Oh,
right?
I like that, Cindy.
Right? Well,
Yes.
think about it. Think about Lot's wife. Like, there's 100, I heard Chris Kane say something like this, and there's like 170 women in the Bible, and only a few of them are mentioned. And even Lot's wife didn't even get a freaking name mentioned.
No,
She was
she didn't
still
get it.
just Lot's wife. But what did Jesus say? He's like, remember, like underline it. Remember Lot's wife. And what did she do? She looked back. And when she looked back, she turned into a pillar of salt. Technically, it's like, what do we all do? We get stuck. That relationship is toxic, but we keep looking back. How many of you have left the person, the guy, the woman, whatever, but you still Google them, or you check
Right.
out their socials, or you do whatever? You're still looking back, right? And
That's
what did
right.
Lot's wife do? She was calcified and stuck, right? I mean, in that spot. What
In that
happens
space.
with the same thing, right? In that space. So to that point, you could have easily continued to just regurgitated the story of sickle cell. I'm not minimizing it at all. I
Right.
love you, but I'm to that point. You could have just stayed there and constantly been speaking to all the downside, which there's so much to that, and instead you repurposed all of that pain
Hmm.
to bring honor and glory and joy.
Absolutely.
How did you do that?
I think it comes from my parents and the way they brought me up. And my mom and my dad taught me resilience because my
Mm.
mom said, look, yeah, you're hurting, but you've got to go to school because I have to go to work.
Wow.
You know, there was
Wow.
no calling my mother. When the nurse said she wanted to call my mother, I would be like, no, no, no. And my brother would too. We were like, no, 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 no. And we weren't being abused or anything like that. You didn't call mom at work. We didn't do that back then. Kids
Mm-mm.
didn't do that. You didn't call for every little thing. You kept your butt at school. So
Yep.
she taught me resilience. She said, because even though I care, your dad cares, everybody out there is not going to care. So you're going to have to learn how to be strong and push through.
Wow.
So
I
I
bet
do.
that I bet that was hard for your mom. I
It
mean,
was
you're a
tough.
mama. I
Yeah,
bet that was tough for her. I bet she just wanted to sit and cry with you. I
probably
bet
so.
she
But she's tough. She's like, suck it up. You gotta push through. You gotta go to school. Now, if we
did.
were really, really hurting really bad and in a really bad crisis, then yes, she would take us to our pediatrician and we didn't go to school that day, or we'd stay home with my dad or whatever. But
Right.
for the most part, we learned to push through and be resilient because most people with sickle cell, you have no other choice. You can either lie down and just give up, or you can push through and be resilient.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting, and I see we only have a couple of minutes, and so I want to wrap this up with a nice, pretty bow. But one of the things that I struggle with our youth today is the whole everybody gets a trophy. Nobody's
Yeah.
taught, not nobody, that's not a fair word. So many people aren't taught like the way you and I were. Suck it up, buttercup. You know,
Hmm.
nobody's coming to rescue you. You better get going. And
Right.
you want to win, then make it so that you can win. You want to
That's
win, do the work. You want to win, practice. Shoot the basket. Take the step, right? And
right.
that's again, just to wrap everything up for today. I love you. And I'm so grateful that God has brought you into my life. And I see so many beautiful things that you bring to this world, and the resilience is a huge thing, but your faith and your honor of your parents and the way that you mother your child, your daughter, all of those things I think are legacy pieces, and the beautiful group that you've created with your dance and what you've done with that. So thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being here today. I already know we could have talked for another hour, so that means we'll do another show. And
Yes.
where can people find you on socials or your website? How can people reach out?
They can find me on Facebook, just Carla Hooker, Carla with the Carla. Hooker, like it sounds, but I'm hooking in people to teach them how to be loving and
Oh,
resilient the
yay.
good way. HOOKER.
I
Yes.
love
Or
that. Go ahead.
carlaskids.org. carlaskidsdance.org. You can reach me on there as well.
You can also find her on the Victory Network on Facebook. Join our group. She is one of my founding members. And very soon she'll be dripping some gold there as well. And we'll have the privilege of hearing some of her fun wisdom and maybe even seeing videos of her kiddos dancing or
Yeah.
something fun. And as we wrap this up today, I just want to encourage each of you, wherever you might be struggling. Carla has struggled with the sickle cell and with, other things besides just COVID, other times being hospitalized, plus, caring for parents and just the things that happen in our lives. But where is it that you're struggling, and where can we support you? Reach out, let us know, send us direct messages. We answer our own messages. If there's anything that you need prayer for, by all means as well. And then I will end by asking you, what do you have to believe? Like, what do you really have to believe to create victory and to create that victorious life? Like, what do you have to believe? And what do you believe in now that's hindering you from doing that? I want to encourage you to change those beliefs. I want to thank you for being here today with the Spanglish World Network and with the HER networks. You can also find us on spanglish.ca where you can listen. And for all things, live it, love it, breathe it, be it, and enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend. And happy, if you're in the US, happy Memorial Day. Thank you so much. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you. Bye-bye.